little musical chairs, and then we're going to get started. We're going to talk about accelerating and co-building. These are two things we kind of talked a little bit about. We talked about accelerators yesterday, but there's this whole new kind of direction that they're going, and there's a whole new way of kind of looking at building companies. And I've got two great folks coming up here to share some of their insights. So let's hear it for Gabriella Draney and Nabyl Charania.
You got it.
All right, let's hear it. Come on.
Hello.
I love those shoes, by the way. They're both really cool.
Thank you.
Those are fun.
Frank, I was told there would be a fire. Isn't this a
I know.
fireside chat?
Well, we try to keep things safe here. My
right.
nickname's Safety Frank, so you'll have to do pretend, imaginary. All right.
Okay, Nabyl, it's just you and us hanging out here. Actually, I feel like, has anybody said they feel like Britney Spears with these little things? It's kind of fun. I don't normally get this kind of fun.
Awesome.
Yeah. So tell us about Rokk3r Labs.
So Rokk3r Labs is a company we put together about 3 years ago. And what we are is we're a company builder. We find entrepreneurs who we think have exciting ideas, and then we partner with them to take their idea to validation, experimentation, prototype, go-to-market, launch, funding, and exit. And we do it in a unique way. We basically, once we validate that an idea is worth pursuing, what we do is we put a cell around an entrepreneur, meaning a team, and become part of his co-founding team and help them actually execute to fruition.
So is it like an accelerator, an incubator, a dev shop?
It's a great question. It's none of the above. So as opposed to an incubator, an accelerator, or a co-working space, we don't do cohorts. We don't have that specific program that you go through. So what we are is actually a place where if you want to build your company and you need a team around you of experts who can help you go from 0 to 100 fast, that's who we partner with, right? That's where we add the most value. And accelerators, incubators, all the other pieces of the ecosystem are just other players in the field. And company builders, I think, are becoming a really great way for entrepreneurs who want to accelerate their growth, actually choose a path of co-building to get their company to market faster.
Interesting, co-building. So why did you decide to start this? Tell us about your background.
So my background, I grew up in Kenya, in Africa. I left when I was 15. I ended up in Canada, have a degree in mathematics and computer science. Right after school, I ended up joining a startup in Europe, and out of all places, and we did SMS billing and downloadable ringtone software for the telco side.
Back in the day.
Back in the day, yeah. So back then it seemed super cool because it was a startup, but now it sucks because you get to pay for text messages. But it was great. I ended up exiting my piece of it, and then I started another company in Jacksonville, Florida. Long story. And ended up building predictive and anomaly engines for voice over IP software. Got acquired by a global HR call center company. I had to stay on for 3 years and run an engineering team. Yeah, it was bad negotiation. And I had to run a team of 300 engineers. And during that process, I had to stay on for 3 years. I ended up realizing that we could do a lot more with teams of 3 to 5 very dedicated people as opposed to what I was able to accomplish with 300 people. And so when my period of non-compete ended, I was in Miami, and I met a bunch of young guys that were going to FIU, which is a local school, and they were working on some really cool tech, kind of like WordPress, but for apps. So how do I build apps faster and take them to market? So I acquired that company with the idea of turning it into a cloud-based platform with APIs so we could build apps and platforms faster, but with a native experience. So this was right after the iPhone and everything had come out. So what ended up happening is people would come to us and say, hey, take my sales management system, put it on the cloud. And since we had a platform, it was super fast for us, and it was super lucrative because we could charge consulting rates. So for 2 years, it was great, and then you end up realizing you're selling your soul for consulting dollars, and it wasn't really what I wanted to do. So about 3.5 years ago, we started Rokk3r Labs. And what would happen is people would come to us and say, hey, I have this great idea. Can you invest, $50,000? Or how do I raise money? Or, I need a developer. And after listening to, I would say hundreds of these pitches, I said, you know what? I love building stuff. And I found a bunch of partners, who have expertise in strategy, design, and I actually selected a team of 5 co-founders, and we created Rokk3r Labs with the idea that if an entrepreneur has a great idea, but they lack this expertise to speed up their entry into market, which we all know is a big problem. Taking too long can kill your company.
Yep.
We would do it in a way where we would take equity positions in the company and build a portfolio of our own early stage startups where, from an investment perspective, I'm a super paranoid investor, right? I like to mitigate all the risks. And the best way, I think, to mitigate risks in early stage startup companies is when you're part of the team building the product, right? So we started that model 3 years ago. Everyone told us we were crazy. Nobody would want to give you equity in the company to help you, for you to help them build it. But it, ended up working out. We have over 30 companies in the portfolio now. We're in London, New York, Spain, and we're getting ideas from all over the world, and we're helping people build their companies.
Cool. So 30 companies. Now, if there are parents of more than one child, we say we don't have a favorite child, but we're totally lying, right?
Yeah.
So what's your favorite portfolio company?
So yeah, it is like picking favorite children. But so from a portfolio perspective, I'm really personally into sensors and data around sensors with my background. I've done a lot of work in human-machine interface and natural language processing, things like that. So one of our portfolio companies is called AdMobilize. And what they do is they basically contextualize sensory data for out-of-home advertising to be able to provide real-time information to advertisers, to security companies. So, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lincoln Road in Miami Beach. You could be walking down Lincoln Road, they're big kind of bus shelter ads, and it notices a group of like 3 guys, knows your age, knows how happy or sad you are, right? And depending on the weather, it says, hey, go visit this bar down the street. But if you're with your family, it'll show you the Disney ad, right? And that's just a real top layer of what they do. There's a lot of intelligence and patents behind it. We've patented paper gaze, things like that. And I'm really excited about that company. And that's one of our more mature companies. It's 2.5 years old, so I'm super excited about that. But then on the flip side, like you said, it's like children, right? So we have tons of other companies. One of our companies is about educating kids, Hispanic-speaking kids, but not about instruction on language or mathematics, but about culture and about ethics. So we built a whole platform of games. It's called Juana La Iguana. You guys should check it out. It's on the top of the App Store right now. And it's basically little games for kids where, if you see a banana peel on the floor, you pick it up and you put it in the recycling can. And they're teaching kids, more ethics. And I'm like that type of company I love because I have kids.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of good companies
So
in the
what's
portfolio.
the coolest product?
The coolest product. It's actually more personal. We have a company in our portfolio actually out of Spain, and these guys did clinical research for 3 years on dementia and how to slow down the onset of dementia. And they came over, and we've been working on this together now for, I would say, this year, 6-7 months. And we took all their research and basically turned it into a series of activities, kind of like Lumosity, but on a mobile platform connected to the watch and all these other systems, so that not just the person who's suffering dementia, but their family can be super involved in the care of this person. And just, the research at a very high level, the guys will kill me, but I'm going to explain it super simply, is that they play all these games for people who have dementia where you have to match a cat to a cat and a dog to a dog, and it triggers your synapses to keep you active. But they realize that if you show people pictures of things that happened in their past, like, a picture of you getting married, or the house you lived in when you grew up, or the pictures of your grandkids, it triggers much more, it fires many more synapses.
Oh, interesting.
And so that company is really awesome. We're hopefully, going to launch in the next few months, and that's something where you can actually help a lot of people, so that's something I'm excited about.
Yeah, I believe more than half this room will be affected by dementia, either through a family member or
It's
themselves.
sad,
so
it's sad, but those are the numbers, yeah.
it's a big deal.
Yeah.
All right, so you talk a lot about exponential organizations.
Yeah.
What in the hell are you talking about?
Very simply, I think it's a way to contextualize and convey a message in a very short frame that we are living in a time and age where companies can be built to do things 10 times faster, quicker, more efficient than their counterparts, right? And it's not just about your idea, it's about how you set up your company, right? So, I'm a big believer in it. I think, everybody is familiar with exponential technologies, right? But when you actually sit down and talk to people, I think a lot of people just glaze over the concept of exponentiality. But, if you told somebody to take 30 steps around the room, but each step, you double it, so you go 1, 2, 4, and you try to take 30 steps around this room, but you doubled every step, you'd go around the world 26 times, right? That's the power of exponentiality.
It's the penny problem.
Yeah, and so if you think about how you're setting up your startup from day one to succeed, how you're creating your teams, your liquid networks, your interfaces within the company, your dashboards like we were talking about earlier, to allow you to make real-time decisions, it can really affect how quickly you get to market, right? And beyond that, from an investor perspective, I like to look at companies that are at the intersection of these exponential technologies. So we may not be building the next great drone, right, like we heard about, or the next great 3D printer, but who's building those companies that are at the intersection of those two, exponential technologies?
Who's
right?
3D printing drones here?
Or,
Anybody?
we're looking at a company now that wants to do they want to 3D print nano sheets, right, to be putting into rooms like this so you can have the right lighting and temperature. Those are the type of companies that I want to focus on building because there is that curve of growth in the technology, and if we put the right type of team around it, we have a much better chance of hitting a home run.
Very cool. All right, so one more question from me, and then we'll see if the audience has some questions. So what in the world is your big vision? Do you have a big vision?
Yeah, I'm going to say something that Ezekiel, actually, from Tech Cocktail, told me earlier, right before we walked in, and we were talking about planning, and he said, I think Mike Tyson said it, you have a plan until someone punches you in the face, right? and then you really realize what you're made of, right? So from a Rokk3r perspective, we don't do long-term plans. But what we do is we do what we have a massive transformative purpose, right? And our massive transformative purpose is to harness global collective genius and co-build companies that change the world. I truly believe that we've moved away from a scarcity-based economy to an information-based economy. Great talent is everywhere. I grew up in Kenya. I'm a testament that this can happen. What's happening to the kid in Kenya that has an idea about drones for scanning their fields of coffee crops to make sure that they're not sick? Where does he go with his idea? How does he find the experts in machine learning and AI and hardware to help him take his idea from what it is to fruition, right? So from my perspective, I think we're living in an amazing period of history. And our vision, our massive transformative purpose is to be that place where if people have great ideas about what they want to do to change the world, they think about us as a place to help them do it.
Very cool. All right, audience. Anybody got a question? Yes.
We met last night, and my question is this. If you are looking at a company to get involved in and have equity in, are you looking for one that is really trying to build the team, or are you looking for one that already has a team that you can complement?
It depends. We're on a case-by-case basis. A lot of times it is the team, but a lot of times it's the idea. And a lot of times it's how early the idea is. Because a lot of our value comes in the team that we put in early on, it allows us to be part of that founding team when it comes to making decisions about pivoting a company or a new market to attack, and we don't have to deal with the headaches of earlier investors or messed up cap tables or issues that a lot of early stage companies face that for us it's just much better to avoid when we know our strength lies in actually helping build the product and take it to market. So it depends. As an industry they're tackling, or problems they have as startups? So the most common problem we tend to see at Rokk3r is that these companies have a really hard time finding the right experts or team to help them take their idea to the next level, right? So even if you have a team of three co-founders, and one's a technical guy, one's the the CEO, and one's like the design guy. Once you go from idea in my basement or garage to I have a little prototype, and now you've convinced somebody to give you $250,000, that's the step at which most companies fail. Because going from those three guys where you have the right culture, the right attitude, the one vision, to saying, I'm going to hire three other guys to help me now meet my product timeline so I can get the next tranche of money, is not as easy. I'll give you an example. We had at the company I was talking about, at Mobilize, maybe a year ago, raised $2 million, right? And when founders raise money, they think, this is it. I've made it. This is a billion-dollar company. And we had an honest conversation, and I said to him, I said, what do you really want to do? He said, I think it's time now that I can go out and hire my own team, right, and continue building. And he came back to us literally, I would say, 72 hours later, and he said, you know what? I've talked to 4 CTOs. I don't even know the first question I would ask a CTO. And then everybody I talk to tells me they're going to need 3 months to hire the right team. And then it's going to take another 6 months to hit my first roadmap. And I'm going to be 9 months out and not really have anything, right? And what we're able to do, we got him a 14-person team in 3 days, and he was up and running. Literally, we talked on Tuesday. Friday, he called me. Monday, he was up and running, right? So a lot of times people come to us with that problem, but it's phrased in another way. The problem is always, I need money, right? And that's the first thing any startup, like, I need the money. And then when you sit down and start talking to them, you realize that they think money is the answer, but in a lot of cases it isn't. Sorry. Yeah. There was a question here, I think. I can't see you back there, sorry.
We're going back and forth.
Yeah. That's a good question. So up to about a year ago, we were basically focused in Miami and the South Florida region, primarily because we were still experimenting, right, on our own model and how things would work. But now we've started doing this in London for the EMEA regions, and we're starting to attract companies out of New York and the Midwest a little bit. But the trick with finding the teams is not that we cannot help people that are not local to the region. It's that I think that initial period, we need to spend a lot of time with the founders to really understand what they need, how we can help the most to help their company grow. And that's been a little bit of our challenge in trying to expand almost in the US. In Europe and in Africa, it's actually a lot easier for us. But out west, it's a little harder for us to get out here, but it's one of those things we're tackling with a new idea, which is going to be more platform-based, but we're going to talk about that maybe early next year.
How do you structure your entities? So are the technologists working directly for Rokk3r Labs, or do you actually place them with the new entity company?
So we started the latter way that you talked about, right? So Rokk3r Labs right now, for example, our team is over 100 people. Over 50 of them are developers, and then we have over 20 to 30 UI UX design experts, things like that. And so when we started, it would almost be like you would pick from our pool of experts, and those people would become part of your team. And we're evolving now very quickly into a cell-based model, where usually it's 3 to 4 people from our team that match more the interest of the idea that you're trying to build. Like, for example, Alzap, the Alzheimer's company I was talking about, there's people that have a very strong attachment to that. So we will take like a UI UX person, the tech lead, and in Alzap's case, a business lead, and put that team and make them the Alzap company with the co-founders. And then they can get options in Alzap while they have a base of options in Rokk3r. And for our team, it becomes a really great way to actually become a co-founder and start one of your own companies, right? Because they go through that process, and Alzap does well. It's great. They have their first success story. They can come back and build another company with Rokk3r on their own. But say something happens with Alzap and doesn't work out, they can come back into the Rokk3r pool, and we try and match them and place them into another company. And from a structure perspective, it depends on what stage the company is before they actually come to us. Sometimes people have already formed, their entities and their structures, or they've raised a little bit of money and they have angel investors, and there's different, preferences and stuff like that, and then we work on it on a case-by-case basis. We have DLA Piper as our attorneys, and that's what they get paid for. But we try and keep it as simple as possible.
As a follow-up, are they on Rokk3r Labs payroll while they're waiting for it?
Yes. So while they're waiting, what we have is we have a process called the think phase, and the think phase is where everybody kind of cuts their teeth, and we figure out how people are good at what they do. And so when an idea comes in, we basically put a team of people around the idea and around the entrepreneur. And if you talk to the team, they'll give you a different description. But from my perspective, my entire goal to them is tell me 100 reasons why we should not do this company together with the entrepreneur. And then 4 to 6 weeks later, they come back and pitch why we should do this together and why it would help the entrepreneur and us to build this company together. And that includes a go-to-market strategy, a blueprint for the team, a technology roadmap, a funding strategy, partnerships, all this type of stuff. Within 4 to 6 weeks, we know whether this is something we want to proceed with or not. And at that point, we then take these people and put them onto the company that we're going to hopefully create a partnership with. I can't see, so I don't know. Oh, there's right here, yeah. If I heard you clearly, it's like,
Hey, speak up.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you.
What culture values do you think as like your coming out of your three-person team, like building out a team that should be continuously in mind and not forgotten?
It's a good question, because it's hard when you scale and then you have to put people in other companies. So I have a very core personal belief, and I think the best way to sum it up is we call it emergent leadership, right? And what that means is you have to be willing to stand up and fight for what you think is right, whether it's in terms of the product, the technology, the business, or whatever else it is. But if someone else comes up to you, whether it's from your team or what we call the Rokk3r SWAT team, which goes around all the portfolio companies, or some of the partners, if you cannot defend your decision and somebody else has better options than what you're giving them, you have to have the strength in your own ego to step back and say, I will try that experiment and see if that works better. And I think that's the only way you continue to try and establish a culture of meritocracy, really, right? Where, like, if you're good at what you do, I don't care if you're, young, old, android, robot, whatever it is. If you can do what you say you're going to do, and you're going to help this company, you will get whatever you deserve for helping that company.
So it sounds like it's a similar model like venture studios, like BetaWorks probably being the most popular. HDF, Smash Left, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
starting to pop up. So I'm curious how you're going to differentiate yourself from all of them. And is there a particular vertical that you're going to tackle more heavily to say this is what we're the best at? So if you have this kind of company, come to us versus any other.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and BetaWorks, I think, is probably the best, known kind of venture builder. They ended up starting or being lucky enough to have their own fund to start with, so their model is slightly different from ours, right? In our model, it doesn't have to be our own idea, or we won't take over full control of the idea or a lot of it. And the difference really is that our focus is not on a specific vertical or industry. It's really on exponentiality, right? So from a perspective, putting on my investor hat for a second, when we look at these companies, it's almost it's a leaderboard of asymmetrical risk, right? If we have 3 ideas and they all are super early stage, right? But one has this huge curve of exponentiality, and the other is almost like could be a great $100 million business. If we're going to take a team and take 6 months and actually take all the risk to build this company, I'd rather bet on the one that has, the curve, right? And so the idea there is focusing on exponentiality also allows us to be a global player, right? In terms of, the teams, the ideas and where they come from, and our process of filtering those ideas is very scalable, right? So that's really our focus. It's focused more on the technology from a core basis of the company. So is that an exponential technology? I mean, everyone's familiar with Moore's law and things like that. But beyond that, is there enough growth in that specific technology so that if we have to make 2 or 3 pivots, we still have a shot at building something that makes sense? And then from an impact perspective, it's about the population, right? Can we create something that'll impact a lot of people? And so, early on, as opposed to other investors, we're not really looking at the type of revenues this company can generate, or, how do I, I'm not looking, we talk to investors all the time, they're like, what's my cost of goods sold, or when am I going to get my money back in 3 months? And that's not the type of thing we're looking at, right? So it's a little longer term, and we're trying to figure out what the best way is to reach a lot of people, and in a B2B sense, can we create the partnerships that allow us to create a distribution channel for these companies?
Is a think period for the people who are working in the organization. So how do you manage the fact that this think period does not elongates to a point for a lot of employees? Because let's say a new startup isn't coming up for an extended period, then this think period can go beyond a point for a lot of people. So how do you make this balance?
Very carefully. No. It's a good question. And what we've actually realized is that there's a lot of people who actually like being on the think team. They don't want to actually transition into a startup. So what we've ended up doing is we have a core of the think team that doesn't actually transition, and they keep the knowledge from all the different think phases they've done. And then on the other side, what we've actually done is we've invested in our own recruitment company. So we're almost on an on-demand basis. We have a leaderboard of like iOS developers, strategists, UI UX people, hardware guys. So when it comes to that period in time, around the 4-week mark, we know what types of people we're going to need, and we start prepping them about the type of company we may potentially bring into the portfolio. And so by the time that happens, we're ready to. It's maximum a 2-week period wait before your team is fully staffed and ready to go.
We have time for one more question.
Nabyl, when you kind of join forces with these companies, what do you see on average? What is Rokk3r looking in terms of an equity stake?
It depends on the stage of the company and where they are. Our range right now is literally 3% to 90%. And it depends on what stage the entrepreneur is. Do they have money to bring to the table or not? How big their team is? How far down the path they are? Or is it just, hey, I have this great idea, I have nothing else, you guys take over and run it. So it's really the range. So we don't have, as opposed to an accelerator or another, we don't have a set like, we'll take 7% and this is what we'll do. We'd really try and evaluate it as a company that we want to be a part of and that we want to build, and what's it worth to us to be able to do that. And in early stage companies, it's almost an art more than a science. Valuations, I think yesterday people were talking about it, $2 to $3 million. How do you know? Right? I mean, how do you really know? So from that perspective, it's almost like we look at, well, what are we going to be at in 3 rounds of dilution down the road? And are we going to be happy with 0.5% of a company? And then everybody always says, well, 0.5% of $1 billion would be great. And we're like, well, okay. But if everyone, if everyone who comes to me says their company's going to be $1 billion, nobody would have to do anything, right? So it's on a case-by-case basis, and we have to be incentivized on our end as co-founders to want to continue to support it the way we would our own company, ultimately, right? So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, Nabyl. It's
Awesome.
been fun up here. Can we
Thank
give
you.
him a nice big round of applause?